G'day, welcome to Does It Matter? It's Kareem here again. Today I'm going to be talking about our lockdowns here in SA. So yeah, if it's not directly relevant to you and you're not particularly interested, well, go to the next video. We opened nightclubs up again. Well, they were one of the first things we shut were nightclubs and beer gardens and large pub areas for good reason during the pandemic. And we have since those mass gatherings have been allowed, we have seen two states now being hit by large numbers of blooms of a return of community spread, or actually an increase in community spread, because when we started this process, it was largely brought in by foreigners and by returning Australians from countries which had much higher COVID infection rates. But now we are being infected by each other within the community, and that's a vastly different proposition. It's much, much worse. And it started when we started doing mass gatherings. We opened up a little early. Now, opening up gyms, I train in one and do some teaching there. And it was a risk, but it seemed to have no real issues. There were no blooms as such when we opened up some shops, some gyms, some things like that. The blooms all started. They all started when we started to have nightclubs and mass gatherings, because anything that was still buried in the community, any infections that were buried in the community, popped out. So I'll be going through a couple of the articles looking at some of the things that they're saying. This is an ABC article, so I'll flick you across to it, and you can see pubs and clubs have reopened as coronavirus restrictions relax. Was that a good idea? Well, I don't think it was a good idea. I think it was a terrible idea. But let's see what they say. Experts have questioned the decision to reopen nightclubs in some parts of the country as coronavirus cases continue to surge in Victoria and fears about COVID-19 clusters in New South Wales grow. All nightclubs were forced to close under the nation's first lockdown. That was one of the first things we did, was lock down these mass gatherings in small, tight places, or relatively tight places, for good reason. And bringing them back probably before Christmas was a mistake. Certainly before September or October was a mistake, in my opinion. But as most Australian states brought the spread of the virus within their borders under control in recent months, many allowed patrons to return to local pubs and nightclubs. Since then, photos and video of crammed dance floors and packed lineups into venues in various locations have emerged on social media, and a cluster of 21 COVID-19 cases have been linked to the Crossroads Hotel in southwest Sydney. Now, the horrifying thing about that particular case is that some of the people went from the Crossroads Hotel to other places, other leagues clubs, which are great big huge, they're common in New South Wales, great big huge multifunctional recreation centres basically, and giant clubs in themselves and pubs in themselves. So they've gone to Casula, they've gone to other places, other leagues clubs, multiple leagues clubs. So they're running around potentially infecting each other in large social gatherings. Because we opened up all these social gatherings before we had eradication. To my mind, if you haven't eradicated it, if you haven't got it down to single digits, or nothing, zero for 3 or 4 weeks, you have no business. We had no business opening up mass gatherings. Oh, it sucks. It sucks enormously. I miss desperately live concerts. I miss live music. Okay, I miss mass gatherings to some degree. They're great. Okay, they're fun. They're also dangerous right now. And we have to be grown-ups and accept the fact that that's the issue. So going back to the article, you can see, look at that. Look at that. They're packed in the front of this venue. This is Hindley Street on Hindley Street. I won't say where it is, but those of you who know Hindley Street will know exactly where I'm talking about. Got to be careful of litigation nowadays. Look at that. They're squeezed in. They're all close together. There's no social distancing there whatsoever. The idea that you can have social distancing and then, you've got, Grant Stevens, a police commissioner, saying about how risky it was and how dangerous it was, but refusing, towing the Premier's line that, it wasn't a mistake. Of course it wasn't a mistake. He's not going to say his boss made a mistake. The reality is it was a mistake. It was a fucking huge mistake. Look at that. Look at that. Packed in. They're dancing. They're supposed to be dancing. God, I sound like a fuddy-duddy. I sound like some 1920s temperance teetotaler. I'm not. All right? A boogie. I like a boogie as much as the next person, but that is not safe right now. It isn't safe. The whole idea that it's also an old person's disease or just a sick person's disease is a myth. All right? It seems to have killed quite a few very healthy people in large numbers. So it's a myth. You just don't know. It's a lottery roll to see if you're one of the few percent that gets really ill from it. And the thing is, dying isn't the only thing that it does. Between 5 and as much as 14% of the population get long-lasting, long-term vascular damage, organ damage, like brain damage, for God's sakes. It does seem to do a lot of bad things to some people. And now we're talking about a significant percentage of the population. It's no longer 1% mortality, and in some countries it's much higher than 1%. So that's only for very rich countries that have excellent healthcare like our own. 1 to 2% is the thing, but if you get a much larger, more densely populated country, even like the US, it's more like 4 or 5% death rate, even with all the modern medical modcons. But the damage rate, the number of people who are damaged by this, holy cow, it's phenomenal. So I'm looking at these pictures. Look at these pictures, this lineup picture of people lined up, packed in. There's no social distancing there. All right? These people need contraceptives. They're that close. It's ridiculous. Should be throwing condoms at them. That is not safe. It frightens the shit out of me. We're not out of this yet, and they're making it worse. All we need is one Victorian, one New South Welshman, one person to sneak across the border. And believe me, that is happening. There are numerous reports by truck drivers of seeing people dirt roading it. And I know the government's slapped a few hundred troops up there as well as hundreds of cops. They're doing their best. I won't, as much as I dislike Marshall and his government, they are doing a reasonable job of sealing up the borders. The problem is it's a physically impossible job. If we get people across who are sick and they can't go anywhere except the shops and home, it's going to be shitloads easier to contact trace them and all the people that they talk to and could potentially infect. Much easier. It's a far easier job, order of magnitude less complicated. But if they're going to clubs like this one, packed in like sardines, and other mass gatherings and weddings and funerals and God knows what else, with dozens and even hundreds of people, look at that line. Please don't tell me that they're not going to infect far more people than we could possibly contact trace. So, I really don't think they thought this through. I think the people that made these decisions made them for political reasons, to buy themselves some political capital, to try and please people. But we all know, those of us who've got kids all know that pleasing your kids is not always the best thing you can do. Certainly not the healthiest and best thing you can do for them. And I'm not infantilizing us. We're not all children. But the reality is that we can be like children sometimes, all of us. We can all get a bit butthurt. We can all get a bit sorry for ourselves and act like children. But the reality is that people's lives are in danger. And these kinds of lines here, this kind of density in these kinds of numbers are a recipe a recipe for a second wave and a third wave and a fourth wave. For God's sakes, we just have to accept for 6 to 12 months that life isn't going to be the same. We need to bite down on that. We need to accept it, all right? And we need to wait for a good long period after there seems to be no infections before we start these activities again. And even in SA, though, we've had quite a few days now of no infection. I think it's 12 or 13 days again of no infections, and that infection was an external one. But that shows me that we're going to get external infections. People are going to come in who are infected, and if they end up in this kind of situation, in this kind of line, they're going to infect a shitload more people than we can possibly contact trace, that we can possibly get hold of before they in turn infect a shitload more people. And we will end up just like Victoria and the way that New South Wales is likely to go. So we need to do something about this, and we need to do it soon. The government needs to bite the bullet, close up the clubs, close up the pubs, front bar only, seated, takeaway, and keep it there for a good couple of months. All right, at least until we have some level of a reasonable level of eradication in New South Wales and Victoria, and that would require them to be COVID-free, no infections for 2 to 3 weeks, at least 2 to 3 weeks. It's the only thing we can do, and it's the best thing we can do. Thanks for that, guys. If you want to help, you can write or email your text, even your Facebook page, Twitter, your local MP, or the Premier's office, Premier Marshall here in SA, Steve Marshall, and see if you can get him to see reason. We need to look. We've just gotten back to work to some degree. Most of us are back at work. We're leading somewhat more normal lives, and we don't want that rolled back, because Victoria and New South Wales have had the unfortunate, and it wasn't really their fault. These kinds of things are almost inevitable. The fault was in opening up a little too early, opening up before there was zero for the required amount of time. SA did it, WA's done it, ACT's done it, and as a result, we seem to be sort of COVID-free bubbles. New South Wales and Victoria opened up too early, and it's cost them, and I feel incredibly sorry for them. But I also feel more sorry for us because we can't wind a couple of things back that we need to, like these mass gatherings. We end up also back under lockdown at home, not able to do anything except look at our neighbours and get fat. All right, so do what you can, guys. Put the word out there. Don't go to nightclubs. Don't go to pubs. Get takeaway. Go home. Don't have mass gatherings in your houses. Just don't do it. Have a few friends over. That's it. Try and keep it under 20. Try and keep the risks down. Let's keep those risks low. All right, and hopefully by Christmas we can all do what we want. Christmas or shortly thereafter in the new year, we can do what we please. Okay, but we need to be more disciplined over the next 4 or 5 months, or we're going to be very, very sorry. I guarantee it. Cheers, guys. Thanks, and watch for my next video coming out very soon.